Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poems of Emily Dickinson contained within the Johnson edition. We are now in poem number 65, I Can't Tell You, But You Feel It, the tribute poem to April. Now, in many ways, this is the companion reading to poem 64 that we just finished with, Some Rainbow. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already been exposed to some of our earlier lectures, including that set of introductory lectures. Now, early on, Emily was always struggling to try and put to words the things that she knew she couldn't say so well. In 1862, Emily actually wrote to Thomas Higginson after reading a newspaper article of his, Letter to a Young Contributor, and this actually began much of their friendship. In that article, he actually said, quote, I fancy in some other realm of existence, we may say to one another, quote, do you remember yonder planet where once we went to school, end quote. This celebration of April, this celebration of the spring, this aesthetic and ecstatic Emily is going to be central to our reading of this poem. Let's enjoy it. She'll begin with the translinguistic observation, I can't tell you, but you feel it, right? Nor can you tell me. It's almost as if she's channeling that opening line of Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. That notion that there's things that we experience, but we feel it, but we can't talk about it. For her, April is a perfect symbol of all those types of things. And then she'll go to saints. And this will take us back to poem 60. Saints with ravished slate and pencil solve our April day. Again, notice all the exclamation points in this poem. Now, think about it. In other words, saints spend all their lives trying to write, ravished slate and pencil, trying to come up with the right words to say something that they understand intuitively, reverentially, in awe, right? And so this is her game. And then she'll go to the word sweeter, where it will, by poem 67, it will be successes counted sweetest. So sweeter than a vanished frolic from a vanished grain, swifter than the hoofs of horsemen round a ledge of dream. I mean, it's majestic. It's magnificent. Her attempts to try to talk about what's so sweet and powerful in April. Modest, and all of a sudden it's like I gotta, back to the word saints, I gotta pull myself back. I'm getting a little bit too excited here. Watch. Modest. Let us walk among it with our faces veiled, as they say polite archangels do in meeting God. I love the word polite. I love her adjectives throughout all of her poetry. It's her selection of the polite archangels do in meeting God. In other words, when you meet April, when you meet the spring, you must do so with a certain attitude of reverence, of awe, right? And notice she'll continue to finish. Not for me to prate about it. In other words, I'm not going to write too much more about it. Not for you to say to some fashionable lady, charming April day. In other words, don't ruin April by having some silly cliche like, isn't it a beautiful day? Well, yeah, and it gets dark at night, is her point. Rather, in other words, don't do that. Heaven's Peter Parley. Now, you'll remember this Peter Parley from our poem 3 study. He wrote books for children to help them learn to read. And notice here, Heaven's Peter Parley. In other words, this is kind of like her argument that St. Augustine will make and others will make, that the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament showeth his handiwork. In other words, this notion that April is compelling way to read theology, right? And again, there's always this very subtle sense that Emily is somehow deconstructing the Christian theology of her day that she was raised on. Rather, Heaven's Peter Parley, by which children slow to sublimer recitation are prepared to go. I love the way she dances between the notion of being a child versus being mature. And she's always playing these kind of language games with us to remind us that we must be at the same moment. Eliot called it still and still moving. But this idea that we got to be children or childlike and yet be mature enough to show the proper reverence for the very thing that we're looking at. Well, at 2A, what are we going to do with a set of lines like this at 2A, themes, messages? I think her simple messages we have to appreciate and be joy-filled in the time of spring in April in particular. I love the idea that this is translinguistic. Notice she'll say, I can't tell you, but let me try. All right, there's a bit of irony obviously there. At 3A, as I said, this is the companion reading to poem 64, the preceding poem. I like to think when I read this poem of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony or Beethoven's Sixth Pastoral, and the way in which there's that great ode to joy that's played with there. And finally at 3B, what about your love of the seasons and especially of April? And is it possible that maybe Emily is teaching us how to enjoy all of the seasons? Thank you.